And then next up every week, I have what I call your weekly dose of higher consciousness quiz. And this week, we're taking a look at public service organizations. So I want you to think about or feel your way. This is a good start to feel. What do these organizations feel like? This is a good practice for your own intuition and understanding of consciousness. Which of these organizations feels of highest consciousness? Now, they are all of higher consciousness. They are all positive aspect oriented. So nothing is low vibe. It's all high vibe organizations. The first one is 4-H clubs. And when I was growing up, I belonged to a 4-H club. And if you don't know what they are, they're community organizations around farm animals, essentially, I think. And understanding how to take care of farm animals, bring them to fairs to show them, you know, if you raise sheep or cows or chickens or ducks and turkeys, you can bring them to fairs to have them rated as to their health and well-being and how well you've raised them, type of thing. So Forage Clubs is one of the public service organizations that I belonged to as a young kid. And at the time, we were raising, I grew up on the South Shore of Massachusetts in Scituate, and we raised chickens, guinea hens, turkeys, ducks, and I think that's it. We had kitty cats along the way. And it was fun to be a part of that, except for as part of the 4-H club, you raise turkeys together and then you slaughter them together. That was not any fun. I was not too pleased to be a part of that. But in any event, that's what 4-H clubs are. The next public service organization is called Doctors Without Borders. If you haven't heard of Doctors Without Borders, it's an organization that takes skilled doctors around the world to help communities that are in dire need of something. And a great example of some of the issues that Doctors Without Borders deal with is like that cleft lip problem. You know, when a young child is born and their face is all disfigured, you know, it's like this or whatever. It's really sad to see kids, but some Doctors Without Borders would send doctors to areas to help fix these situations. Another example I saw on TV was doctors going to the Nepal, the Himalayas, where people are living up really high in the atmosphere, like 10,000, 14,000 feet. And they have chronic eye conditions because they don't know how to, you know, wear sunglasses or whatever. So that's another issue that Doctors With Borders helps with. So it's 4-H clubs we're looking at, Doctors Without Borders. And the last one is YMCA or YWCA clubs, which are typically boys and girls clubs that help, you know, provide, I'm not sure all that they do, but I'm pretty sure they provide a location for kids to meet, have events, work together, play together, whatever it is that they do. So those are the three organizations, and I want you to consider which one do you think is of highest consciousness, and, you know, figure out what's it on the map. Start at the lowest, what's the lowest, what's the next, what's the highest. And I'll answer that one at the end of this week's podcast. Always going to feel better, and it's all temporary. All right, so we're going to go back to our weekly dose of higher consciousness quiz, where I wanted you to consider which of these public service groups are of highest consciousness. Try to figure out, you know, how they go up the map of consciousness. And again, if you don't know what I'm talking about, you're going to want to go look at episode 3 and 4. I think 3 talks about higher levels of consciousness on the map, and 4 talks about lower levels of consciousness on the map. So you need to know the map to put into context how to deal with your life and yourself and your emotions and everything that's going on. So the public service groups we're looking at today are 4-H clubs, Doctors Without Borders, and YMCA and YWCA organizations. And let me just look at my spreadsheet so I give you guys the right consciousness calibrations of all of these. And Dr. Hawkins, everything I teach to you comes from the teachings of Dr. David R. Hawkins, who wrote Power versus Force. And you'll want to look at the episode number 2, which I talk about the teachings of Dr. David R. Hawkins. He's super powerful what he's brought to light in his book, Power versus Force, among a dozen other or more books on understanding levels of consciousness. Okay, so let's start with the lowest level of consciousness. And again, none of these are low levels of consciousness. They're all very high levels of consciousness, these groups. But the lowest level of consciousness in the three today are Forage Clubs, which calibrate at 370 on the map of consciousness. This is super high. And if you have kids, you want to send them to Forage Clubs. They're going to learn a lot about self-reliance, collaborating with others, and taking care of animals in 4-H clubs. So 370, most of the world does not calibrate this high, let me tell you. 85% of the world calibrates below 200. So if you're engaged in something in the 300, anything above 200, you're helping yourself and the rest of the world in a big way. So 4-H clubs are huge as to their level of consciousness and how they help young kids get on track with being of higher consciousness in their lives. Let's see, next up was the YMCA and YWCA clubs. They're of very high consciousness as well, and they calibrate at 380 on the map of consciousness versus 370 for 4-H clubs. That's a quantum leap between the two because the map of consciousness is a logarithm. It's a log 10. So 4-H clubs are 10 to the 370th power. The YMCA and YWCA clubs are 10 to the 380th power. So they're in about relatively the same ballpark, but they're really a quantum leap apart. So it'd be interesting to look deeper into why the YWCA are such a quantum leap above 4-H clubs. And it's, I don't know what it is, but it could have to do, I don't know what it is. Maybe it's the age of the group that you're dealing with. Maybe it's older kids that are, more further along in their own consciousness. I don't know. I haven't done the studies into it, but it'd be interesting to look at what their founding principles are and look at the language there. That's where I would start as a student of consciousness. I'd look at that and see what's going on in there that's would come out to me, stand out to me as of higher consciousness. And finally, Doctors Without Borders is the public service group of the highest consciousness at 500. 500 on the map of consciousness, 10 to the 500th power, is the level of love. This is huge. This is beyond science and medicine. This is doctors with love in their hearts, along with brilliance and skills to help others without requiring anything in return. So Doctors Without Borders is, if you choose to be in the organization Doctors Without Borders, you're going to be of a higher calling. It's a higher calling to be a part of this, to give unconditionally without expecting anything in return, I'm pretty sure. I don't know how they operate, but I'm pretty sure you're not getting paid a boatload of money to become a doctor without borders. So that's our weekly dose of higher consciousness quiz. I hope you found that really interesting. And if you want to, a great book I'd recommend from Dr. Hawkins is called Truth versus Falsehood. And I don't have it with me at the moment to show you, but you can Google it and find it online. And you can find links to all of Dr. Hawkins' books on my website, trumpeteroftruth.com. And there's always a way to find it. But the Truth versus Falsehood book is really excellent because it's a little simpler to understand. And it's kind of written like an encyclopedia of consciousness calibrations. And it's a great way to put everything into context. Like, it's fun to see the level of consciousness of movies, of books, of times in history, of leaders throughout history, of political kind of intentions throughout history. Super, super informative and fun to understand where true power really exists. So check out Dr. David R. Hawkins' book, Truth versus Falsehood. You'll find it on their website, veritaspub.com, and always on Amazon. That's always, if you forget what was that website, go to Amazon. So that's it for your weekly dose of higher consciousness. I hope this helped with how to deal with depression. And give it a try. If you're chronically depressed, you may not want to try it, or you may just say, I've got the courage and I'm willing to do this because I'm done with this. You always suggest that you stick on your medication and professional help. This is just a way to do it on your own and see what happens. It's not going to kill you. Hopefully. Won't drive you nutty either. Anyway, if you enjoy what's going on here, follow us on our podcast at trumpeteroftruthradio.com. Or if you prefer a video, you can follow me on trumpeteroftruth.tv.com. And if you have some questions or there's a topic you'd like me to cover, you can email me at liz@trumpeteroftruth.com. Thank you so much for joining me this week. Stay tuned every week. This just came to me, so I can't really tell you what's going to come up next week, but I do think I'm going to work on the level of consciousness of neutral, because every month I want to pick one level of consciousness and focus on it. And I love the level of consciousness of neutral because I think you can use it to help you raise your own level of consciousness once you understand how powerful being neutral can be. Thanks for being here, gang. See you next week. And before I go, I always like to end every podcast with this. Love is the truth. Love calibrates at 500 on the map of consciousness. And whether you believe it or not, use the mind and the understanding that true power exists outside of the mind in the realm of love and the nonlinear domain of spirit. See you next week, gang. Thanks for joining me.